Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening. This is a topic that I'm really passionate about, and I would like to explain my personal preference for using painted models when tabletop wargaming. So, my goal here is not to offend anyone, but rather just to explain why I hold this opinion and hopefully convince those of you who are on the fence that maybe this is a better option. So I'm not dictating what should be allowed in your hobby space. Please note the word choice I'll be using in the video, such as my opinion or I believe, likely, most people. I'm not stating facts here. These are opinions just based upon some common themes that I've witnessed, and here they are. Opinion number 1, playing with or against unpainted armies, or terrain for that matter, is something I don't enjoy doing, or therefore I won't do it. Opinion number 2, I feel there are very few good reasons why you should show up to a war game with unpainted models. I'm sorry if either of those make you upset, but hey, some people are just different. I'm probably in the minority here. It's not that I think less of you as a person, I just disagree with your choice and your opinion, just like you can disagree with mine. Call me names and complain all you want. And I feel strongly this hobby is an aesthetic one, like model railroading. For trains, it's based on placing finished, colorized miniatures into a fantastical or historical setting. And I think that's what distinguishes this hobby from board gaming, let's say. So if you want to play board games like Catan or Memoir 44, you don't need to paint your models. I get that. That's great. Go enjoy board gaming. But, why do I insist on playing with no gray? Well, number 1, I value the look and feel of the board over the competitiveness of the game. I love creating a narrative and becoming immersed in the spectacle before my eyes. It's the same tickle you get when you see a finished model railroad set. It's just badass. You know what I'm talking about. You see a board, a wargaming board, and the excitement you feel in the pit of your stomach when you walk up to someone else's board at a convention, let's say, and behold a magnificent setup. Even from 20 feet away, your excitement builds knowing that you're about to see something pretty incredible. And just think to yourself, wow, I would love to play on that board and with those models. That's probably what got you into this hobby at some way, shape, or form here. Maybe it was even in a magazine, but definitely not gray models. Okay. The next reason why I insist on playing with painted models is because I've spent a lot of time and money on this hobby. I want the playing experience that is maximized to the fullest. I want to photograph and remember the event. I want to look back upon it, maybe show my friends in the future, and be proud of the table when I do show it to others, and maybe try to even recruit new players. So what I do, I make sure ahead of time that the person I'm going to play is also thinking the same thing. I don't mind forgoing games or gaming partners who feel differently. I'm patient enough to wait for the next opportunity. I really love the immersive look, the board, and usually will add a narrative prior to the game. I come from a background and a circle of older gamers in the mid-90s where, it was expected that you come with painted models. It was just the rule we had, and it was never a detractor for new players. Nobody fought against that concept. It was actually an incentive for you to get your stuff painted. In fact, we'd sometimes even forgo the gaming session altogether, and we'd have a group painting session. We'd all agree to help bang out some bigger squad, do a bunch of chain painting. You do the brown boots and the bags and the leather, and I'll do all the metal stuff while it's drying, and we just go around. We were the guys that would go to a big convention, like Origins or something, and we'd bring a big truck full of incredible gaming boards and host an event. And there was just no way in hell we're going to allow gray models on the board. You just didn't do that, and nobody even asked about it. So now you know about my background. So now I'm going to make a few controversial statements here. I feel there are very few excuses not to paint your models prior to coming to the table. And I can boil them down into kind of the 4 main categories. One is extenuating circumstances. The second is lack of time or patience. Number 3 is lack of interest, and 4 is a fear of painting. So regarding the extenuating circumstances, some people have medical reasons and difficult times. I get that. If you have limited time due to a tragic circumstances beyond your control, I'm sorry you're in that situation. You need an outlet to play some games, and I wish you all the best. All I can say otherwise is maybe consider painting anyways. It's a stress reliever, and honestly, it's probably the one thing you can control, unlike the outcome of a game. But the vast majority of people do have the time. They just make a conscious decision not to do it, just like working out. If you want a painted army, you'll find the time to make it happen. It may take you a while, but if you can work in 30 minutes a day or 30 minutes a week, you'll eventually get there. And yes, you may need to forego a few games instead to paint, but then you'll have a painted army for the rest of your life. I'm 42 years old, and I'm still enjoying armies that I painted back in high school. Back then, I had tons of time and no money to paint models, but I could paint. Now it's the opposite. I have no time, and I have a wife, 3 kids, an old house, a full-time job. I paint very infrequently, but it gets done, and it's worth the wait. So I don't really buy the sob stories of not having enough time. So, this thinking that it's rampant in our culture today, immediate satisfaction. I got to play with these now. I got to play with these models right now. And if you just keep following that logic, then you can end up with an entire unpainted army, never painted. So what's the driving force then to make you want to do it? You might as well just use blank bases or cardboard cutouts or a Coke can to represent your models. I mean, who even needs to assemble anything? Are you even really in the hobby at that point? So, this makes me the jerk, right? I'm the jerk. Meanwhile, I put in hours and hours of my time getting ready for the game to ensure that, my opponent can have an immersive experience, that the game table looks great. But I'm the jerk because I want it to look decent. And, and so I don't play with certain players. And it's bad enough that we're playing with toy soldiers, but, unpainted models make it look like a 4-year-old is involved. So the third factor, people say is, or I think is an apathy or a lack of interest in the hobby. So if that's the case, I get it. You just don't want to paint. Do I really want to play with somebody who's going to maybe quit halfway through the game because they're not that excited about it? The fourth excuse is a fear of painting. I understand, but let's be honest. Painting is easy and cheap. It's not like we're sailing a yacht here or playing golf for that matter. If you can afford the models, you can afford the paint. Let me repeat that. If you can afford the models, you can afford the paint. And if you can glue them together, you can learn to paint. If you have time to play games, you have time to paint. So coming to the table, with an army simply base coated with a rattle can is at least a start. And that's great. Put a sloppy wash on there and, it's starting to look like something even my 6-year-old can do. My painting sucks. I use Tabletop Ready. That's basically all I paint to. And you could see some of these images that are on here. This is all my stuff. It's nothing great. It's just Tabletop Ready. You can learn it on a Google video. And I'm not criticizing anyone's ability to paint here. I am, however, criticizing the decision not to even try. So, it's like a video game. If you don't start doing it, you're never going to get good at it. Everybody sucks in the beginning. This isn't gatekeeping. It's having a basic standard. I also don't play against people who won't wear pants. It's not gatekeeping if it's a basic requirement for the hobby. I'd rather sit down and help you start learning how to paint so that the next time we meet, we have a good looking game. Or I'll just scale my army down to match the size that you have painted. So that's another option. So what are the counter arguments here? People say, well, why isn't this good enough? Why is it my decision to paint the army, not paint my army? Why is that wrong? And my response is that it's neither good nor bad, but I just question the idea that, is this really what you want? I don't know anybody who's gotten into this hobby because they saw a bunch of great models. And the bottom line is nobody prefers to paint with play with an unpainted army. And similarly, nobody prefers to play against an unpainted army. That's for damn sure. That's why all the photos in the rule books have painted armies fighting each other. The second, response I get is, well, it's my hobby and you shouldn't tell others how to play their hobby. Well, sorry, mate. The moment you put the miniatures down on the table, it becomes our hobby. Okay, it's our hobby now. And somebody on Daka wrote the following, great quote here. This is a social contract. Both players are here to partake in a combined experience, and all players should be doing their best to pull their weight and add their quality to the game. So my point here is, when you come to the table with an unpainted army, you're basically telling your opponent, you're not worth it. I don't respect you enough to come prepared, and I'm more interested in winning the game. The third excuse I hear is, well, I want to try out these models before, I paint them. Well, I'm not your guinea pig here. My time is limited. I don't have time to just throw away a game like this. Try them at home on a solo board if you have to. So I think the propensity for unpainted armies and squads or single models even has gotten so pervasive in this hobby, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more people that tolerate it, the more it becomes the norm. And there was a time when GW wouldn't even let you bring unpainted models into the store. Did that make them monsters? You can't enter most tournaments with unpainted models for a reason, because it's not the same hobby. Okay? You're not in the same hobby if you're playing with unpainted models. I love the new rule in 40K where you get victory point bonuses for having, painted models. I think that's a great way to enforce the issue. And, frankly, I think the penalty should be higher than it is. So, in summary, painting is, the hobby is 1/3 of the hobby is painting. Step 1, print your models. Step 2, paint the models. Step 3, play with the models. There's a reason why we call it tabletop ready. It's because you're now ready to play the game. Coming unprepared to the game with gray models is like coming with no models. You might as well use slips of paper. So, I'm not trying to be a dick here for the sake of it. I'm not gatekeeping the hobby or trying to keep others out. I'm just being honest with myself and my opponent and how I'm going to spend the next 4 hours of my Saturday or my vacation. That's extremely precious to me. The little time that I get on a board, it better look badass. So I'm not discriminating against any one individual. I'm making these statements to a broader group of hobbyists. I'm not targeting a characteristic that you can't control, like a gender or your race or even your paint skill for that matter. I'm not yelling or swearing. I'm not calling anyone names or acting nasty. If anything, that's the response I'm going to get. I'm not trolling here. You clicked on this video. I didn't ambush you with it. The title is very clear. I'm not going into hobby shops and telling people any of this. I just seek out people and be very clear with them up front. Let's schedule a game, but I want to play with painted models only, please. That's not being a dictator. I'm just communicating. If anything, being clear is kind. Being unclear, is not helping anyone. So anyways, if you're on the fence and you're thinking about how you want to pursue your hobby here, don't do this for my sake, or don't do it for your friend's sake. I think you owe it to yourself. You paid all this money for these models. You're likely to feel rewarded when you do paint them, and you're just going to get better and faster with time. I'm also, asking you to be considerate of the person across from you when you do come to the table. Being patient is a virtue. Your friends will be much more surprised when you, enjoy the first game with some painted models. And if you're already the person who plays with fully painted models, my advice to you is don't be afraid to ask for what you want. The time you spend doing the hobby is your hobby time, not somebody else's. Don't settle for a game just because you don't want to make somebody else feel slightly uncomfortable. Help them paint their army if that's the case. And some of you might be wondering, lastly, why I use an alias or have my comments turned off, and it's because I don't need the comments here. I don't need you to tell you agree with me or you disagree with me. I don't need an echo chamber. I'm not looking for a conversation. If you want to have that, go over to some of the websites. Adaka has a good post, and to each his own. All right. Cheers.